Hello, everybody, and welcome to our November session for Doctor Integration. And in this session, we're going to cover using the APIs that are available in TIBCO Cloud Integration. My name is Jeff Levinson. I'm a customer success engineer with TIBCO, and hope you will enjoy the session. All right, so what's the agenda? First, we want to review the available APIs that TIBCO Cloud Integration does provide you. We want to go over how to set up the APIs in terms of authentication, whitelisting, and understanding where the which URLs you want to use. Of course, we're going to give you some real-world examples, and then we're going to give you a list of resources. So there are three APIs available in TIBCO Cloud Integration. The one that we'll spend a good amount of time on today is the one for TCI Connect, which is also known as Scribe. And the interesting thing about this API is that it's used by our iPaaS. It's used by our online application. And all the functionality that you can do within our online application is available to you in the API, except for the debug. Debug is still a private API that we have within our system. But aside from that, anything that you can do on screen within the application, you can also perform those functions within the API. There are also some additional sets of functionality in the API that are not in the iPaaS. There's things around some cloning solutions and a few other things that you have in the API that are not available to you in the front end. And then there's TCI also has what we call the integration API. And this API is basically for managing your Flogo and BW, related assets, your applications, things in the marketplace, extensions, and all that. And then there's another API for the Connected Intelligence Cloud. This is really specifically for the orchestration and the management of organizations and users. And it's primarily for our OEM partners. So if you're, deploying a lot of organizations, adding a lot of users, doing a lot of automation around spinning up new organizations, things like that, then you would use that. This one we're not going to cover this one today. It's really specifically for OEM partners, but I did want you to know that is available in case you actually needed it. All right. Let's look at how we're going to set these up. So we're going to walk through the setup of both TCI Connect and the integration API. So first thing we want to do is log on to TIBCO Cloud Integration. In fact, let's start from the beginning here. Let's go all the way back to, let's log out, and then we will start from the beginning on this. All right, so signing in. And the key thing to remember here is when you sign in, you have to select the region. Now, the region is going to dictate the URLs that you're going to use for the APIs, and we'll see what that list is after we log in. All right. So I'm set up in AWS US. So once I click on here, it's going to log me in, and I'll authenticate. We have it set up to authenticate through Google. And now once I'm logged on, you see the main page. And then the main page allows you to select which organization. Again, this is going to come into play in terms of how the API interfaces with the organizations and how you get OAuth, how you get your OAuth tokens. What we're going to do is we're going to use our main organization here. Well, we're going to actually let's use the child organization here for the sample for setting up TIBCO Cloud for TCI Connect. So each organization has its own org ID number, which is used for the Scribe API, as well as another identifier, which is used for the integration API. So again, you want to think that there's two APIs we're going to give you to access. One of them is going to be specifically for the Scribe functionality, and the other one is going to be essentially for everything else: Flogo, BW, etc. All right. So now, in order to we need to get that information. So we need to capture that. So we're going to log on under integration. So head over here, go to our integration tab, and I don't know why it's logged out. It shouldn't have been. All right. And now once we head over to integration, we'll see we're going to head over to our environment tools setting. right? I'm not sure why that's like that. Hold on. All right. There it is. Now we're bringing up integration. We're going to select our organization. Interesting. Let's try clearing some of these things out. Okay, try that again. I haven't seen that before. I think I closed the tab too quickly. All right, there it is. Probably some cookie issues there. So head over to environment tools and you got to go over to security settings. And the key things we want to do here are we want to copy the org ID. So this is the org ID that we're going to use for our Scribe API. We also want to copy this subscription locator. This subscription locator is essentially, it's the organization ID for Flogo and BW. And we also want to set our API password. Now, this API password is used for TCI Connect, and it's enabling basically our basic authentication in order to use the API. So the integration API is going to use OAuth, and this one's going to use basic authentication. So you go up here, change the API. I've already set this password here. So when you change your API password, it's going to be linked to the email that you have already created that you've used for this account. And this password is actually for all of the organizations that you have access to. And as long as you're an admin for each of these organizations, you'll be able to access the API. So that's going to be under the settings for each of your organizations. As long as you're an admin, you'll have API access to these organizations. So you need the org ID number, which is here. You need to set your password one time and give you access to all the orgs that you have. And then you also need to whitelist any for the API access where you're going to be executing your calls from. In this case, we have our cloud infrastructure here whitelisted in case we use our built-in platform connector for this. And I have this set up here for our Postman examples. All right. So that's how it works for the TCI Connect. Now, for the integration one is a little different. So with the integration one, you actually head back to the home page. You go to settings. And this is where you're going to get your OAuth token here. All right. All right. So I've already created an OAuth bearer token. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can generate a token, and you can get a token for, I think, up to 30 days as a bearer token. And you can also use the OAuth client grant method in order to get a token. For simplicity's sake, I just got a bearer token here, and that's what we're going to be using for our samples today. All right. All right. And then also you're going to need the locator ID for your Flogo organization when we make those calls. All right. There's one other thing you need to do in order to use this. So in order to set this up. So what you need to do is you need to create a bearer token actually for each of your organizations within Flogo. All right. So this is actually a child organization. And when I go up to a parent organization, I actually need a separate token for that parent organization also. Okay. And then what you want to do is you're going to want to head over to the API page here. And this is where we're going to access the integration API. All right. And then what we're going to do here is if this is the first time you're using the API for an organization, you actually should go over to our Swagger page here. And first you're going to set up the authorization and use that. So I'm not going to enter in the bearer token here. I'll bring it over to a different screen first. Give me a second. All right. And then what we're going to want to do is use this bearer token to turn on the, hold on, let me get the windows back here. To enable API access for that particular organization. All right. So give me a second here to bring this back. All right. A lot of windows flying around here. Give me a second. It's back here. Okay, great. So then what we need to do is you need to go. So I've put in the authorization for the bearer token for the organization that I want to enable API access on. Then I head down here, and under the organization chart, I go to the post, turn that on, and I'm going to try it out here, and I'm going to put in the subscription locator for that organization. All right. So it's in order to that, then I'll go here, I'll execute this, and this will enable it. Now the status is enabled for that child organization, right? So when you do set up a new child organization, you actually have to go in. It's a simple thing, go into Swagger definition, enter in the newly created OAuth token that you have, enter in the subscription locator, and then post it so you can actually do the update on that, all right? That's something you should be aware of when you need to enable access, that you do need to enable access for your organization every time you create one using that subscription locator. All right. So now let's go back to TCI, and let's go to let's go to our child organization where I have another connection set up. So we're going to show some Postman examples. We're also going to show some examples that use the built-in connectivity for our platform API connector. All right. So Scribe has a very nice built-in platform API connector that allows you to be able to execute the functions within the integration itself. Right. This allows you to do things like run integrations, clone integrations, download execution history, and things like that. It's all pretty straightforward in terms of how that works. But what I want to do is show you an advanced example. First, I'll show you how to create that connection using the platform API connector. Then I'm going to show you an advanced example. Within the marketplace, there are plenty of good examples within the marketplace for using the built-in connector, and you can head over to marketplace, head over to asset types, and do connector, and then you'll be able to see the ones that we have here for the applications that we have for our using the platform API connector in here. All right. So first thing you want to do is head over to the marketplace and head over to the connectors and head over to connecting. You're going to want to enable the one for the platform API. And this is the Scribe platform API. So anytime you're going to use it, you're going to use a connector within Scribe, you have to enable it first. We can see this one's already installed, pretty straightforward, but you do need to just do this one step every time that you go in and log on. All right. And then what you want to do is head over to connections, and you're going to create a new connection. And I'll just show you how that connection is configured. So I have one here for the Scribe platform API. All right. And the key things here, you're going to give it the name. We selected the platform API type connector. I just call it the API. Then what I did here was I gave it I used the URL, which is associated with the AWS for this. And if you head over to our whitelisting page here, this will be on the resources. When you're using the API for this, these are the 3 different APIs that you have access to, right? So we have AWS Australia, AWS US, and then Azure US. These are the 3 regions that Scribe is available in. So you need to select the correct endpoint for this, and that's the endpoint that we're using here. You need to select the default organization, and this username is, of course, the email address that I logged in with, and then the password is going to be the password that I entered on that securities page. Now, an important thing to realize here is that when I test this, I need to be sure that whatever agent I'm testing it from, that the IP address for that agent has been whitelisted on that security page. And that's what that security page is really for when you're here, this environment tools on the security page. That's what it's really for, is to whitelist where that's coming from. And it's going to work. It's going to work here for this one because we've whitelisted the IP addresses for our cloud agents. All right. So that's all set there. And then once you've done that, then you can use this within integrations. All right. So we've covered the examples of how to go and we've covered how to configure your APIs, security settings, getting your tokens and everything like that. Now let's jump into some examples. All right. Hold on. Give me a second here. Okay. 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 So let's head over to our TIBCO Cloud Swagger page here for our Flogo ones. Let's walk through a couple of these. So Flogo doesn't have all the built-in functionality you would get with your all the applications that you have, all the options that you have, but you do have a good cross section of the different your different operations here. Give me 1 second. I have to enter the Sparrow token here. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Make sure I have this here. Okay, let's head back on this page. All right, so let's go and let's just do a list of the apps here. So let's just get a list of the apps, and we're going to try this out. And as you can see, this is the subscription locator here. We're going to execute on this. I'm going to get back all the list of all the apps that we have. And this is all the apps that are listed here. It tells you the different application types. You can actually sub-select. You can either do all, you can do Flogo, BW, or Node. So we can go here, we can execute and just bring back a list of all the Node apps that we have within our organization. All right. And you can also bring back details for any particular app, right? So once we have an app here, we can bring back the details for that. So let's go to here, Flogo. Let's execute this. All right. And then just bring this app ID in, and we'll bring back the details for that app ID. Okay. All right. Let me bring the all right, then we get the details of that particular app ID. All right, and we can see these examples over here in Postman also. All right, so let's head over to TCI API. We can bring back our app list here, and when we send that off, we can see that we get this app list. We get our list of apps back in Flogo, and then we can also get the app details back here. And pretty straightforward in terms of how that works. And you can see what all the different ones are on this Swagger page here. You can test them out here. You can test them out in Postman, and it all is pretty straightforward, right? So you can for the apps, you can you can export apps. You can list all the extensions that are within your organization. You can list all of the marketplace, all the users, and everything like that. So this gives you a good, a good way to manage all of your Flogo, BW, and Node.js apps. And also, just one thing to be aware of is when you're here on this page and you're looking at your total list of, you're looking at all your apps here, okay? This is actually pulling from two APIs. It's pulling from the Scribe API, and it's also pulling from the integration API, right? So there's two APIs that we have, and when you're looking, in this main application here, it's pulling from both of those APIs, okay? Now, the Scribe API documentation is on this page here, right? And then you head over to Documents Web API, and this brings you over to the Scribe documentation here, all right? And this shows you all the different endpoints that we have here. So we'll just show you a couple examples on this. So here we're going to get the list of solutions. I'm going to send this off. I'm going to get the list of solutions for all of my solutions here, and that's basically what we see here is we see essentially it's this list of this all list here with the on schedule, on event, and the ones that are just everything but the developed ones. All right, so it's the it's all these ones on schedule and data replication, all the ones that we see here. And we can see then this is the actual list right here. All right. We can also get a list of agents too. Get a list of agents on this organization. And this will show us our list of agents, both cloud and on-premise. And also, as well as, if you notice the cloud agent here too, there's actually multiple cloud agents are actually individually deployed for each application in your application list. So when you see this list of, when you see the cloud agent, it actually shows you what the master one is, the control agent, and then it shows you the list of all the individual agents here. And there's something you don't see in the UI itself. It's something that it gives you this, it kind of shows you all this list of agents here. So under the hood, actually, even though technically here we head over to environment tools, and we look at our agent list here, and we see that we just have one cloud agent here and something running on my sandbox. Technically, each app that uses a cloud agent is going to have that, and we see that shown here when we do this API call, and then we see that there's an additional agent here for the on-premise agent, right? Okay, great. All right. So let's head over to our, I want to show you an advanced example using the built-in platform API. So let's just head over and check that out. Okay. All right. Okay. So we know that we have the ability to access a lot of, we have the ability to do anything within the application itself, we can do within the API. So a common thing that people use is lookup tables. And lookup tables are a 2-column database that is stored up in the cloud. And people use these traditional for things like pick list and translating things like, state abbreviations, CA to California, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But however, this also does give you a place where you can store data that you can use between integrations. And because this is accessible via the API, you can actually use it within Scribe itself. And we actually have integrations within Flogo, which are interfacing with this API and using this as a data storage place. So let's see what this looks like when we head over to Scribe and use the data, see how we can store data when while we're running an integration, right? So what's the use case, Ken? The use case here is that we're going to have a couple maps with an integration, right? And the first map we want to do is we want to populate our lookup table using our API built-in API connector, right? So the example here is we're going to show you a simple source, and the source here is basically a query contact. We just have this contact record that has an email address in it, and we're going to store the email address and the ID. So we're essentially making a key value pair store of the email address and the ID. So we also use the variables connector, which is useful. And I'm just going to show you a couple tricks here that we're also using in this particular map. So one trick we're using here is I'm using this first record simulation here. So what I'm doing is I'm simulating a sort of a when start routine by having an if block, which says if it's the first record, the condition here is say if record number equals 1, then we're going to execute this block of code that's all within here, okay? And what does this block of code do? Well, it sets the org ID for our, that we're gonna use. It sets the table name that we're gonna use for our lookup tables. And then it initializes initializes the table ID to a null value. Then what it does is it actually does a fetch into the API and loops through all of the tables, and it tries to match the GUID of the table with the name of the table. Because if you think about how you use lookup tables, you care about the name, but the API actually needs to use the GUID of the table in order to do operations of the table. So this first section here is going to loop through all of the tables, and it's going to match the ID, the GUID ID, against the name. All right. And it also does some advanced things here. It actually does some advanced duplicate checking to see if you happen to have two tables with the same name. And if you do, it's going to throw an error. This goes through a lot. This particular map has a lot of very tight error handling so that you're not accidentally causing any data corruption on that, right? And then after it does this, it's going to, if it doesn't exist, it's going to create the lookup table. And then what it does is it fetches a lookup table. So in this case, it's going to use the include on this subquery, and this queries the table. We see that it queries the table based upon the ID, right? It pulls back all of the values that are in that table. And then what it does, it writes each of those to memory as a variable. So basically what it does, very simply, you put in the name of you put in the org ID, you put the table name that you want to use. It goes through and it pulls that table into memory. It either creates it or pulls it into memory. And then now all those values are in memory, so it doesn't need to do any additional API hits on that. So this is also designed to limit the number of API hits. Also wanted to mention that there is a limited number of APIs you have, both in terms of calls per second and then calls per day with the Scribe platform API. So you do need to be sure that when you're writing code against it, you're not doing too much to burn through all of your API hits. Okay, great. And now what this does here is at each record, what it's going to do is it's going to use the key value and it's going to look that up in memory. And if it exists in memory, it's going to see if the value matches. If it does, then it's cool. If it doesn't, it's going to update that using the API. So you can see we've done a minimum number of calls to the platform API. We've done a subquery fetch here that brings us back all of the tables. Then we potentially could create a table here. We do one more fetch, which brings us all of the values for the particular table that we're interested in. And then as we loop through the records, the only time we do a create or an update on that is if it's a new record or something doesn't match. All right. And then when you use this, is you just sort of unwind the whole thing again. You do the same thing with the first record. You say, hey, I'm going to execute this to the first record. I run it, pull everything into memory. And now that everything, sorry, this is the wrong one, not the populate one. I wanted to use the use API. So we do the same exact thing when we go to use it, right? And what we do here is we write everything into memory and then we just pull it out of memory. And again, this is using the minimum number of API hits. Now, the reason we run it in and out of the platform API itself is there's sometimes a delay in terms of how it would sync down to an agent. So this allows us to go to the authoritative source of the data that we stored in the lookup tables. And if we use it if we're populating in one flow in a map and then using it in another, this is going to ensure we don't run into any timing issues when it attempted to sync it down. All right. So that's sort of another advanced methodology that you can use with the platform API. And just wanted to show you one more thing that's possible too. Again, there's some great examples. If you walk through this, you can go to the marketplace, you can see the examples. I think people who are familiar with APIs, they can sort of, it's pretty straightforward how all this works. But I just want to show you something else using Postman. So sometimes people will say, hey, how do I create a schema based upon the schema of some existing entities within Scribe, right? So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the connections, and we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to get a list of all the connections. All right. Then we're going to get details about the entities for a particular connection. Then we're going to get detailed about the fields for that particular entity. Okay. And what is this useful for? This is useful for if we wanted to potentially build a schema based upon, build some type of database based upon what's already existing in our, based upon some source that we already have. All right. So there's a couple step process here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to retrieve all the connections. So we're going to send this off. We're going to retrieve all the connections, and then we're going to find the connection that we want to use. And in this case, it's the Salesforce one here, right? And then we're going to get the list of entities that goes along with that Salesforce connection. And this is also what happens under the hood when you're using the tool itself and you're designing the tool. This is the same process it goes through to retrieve the metadata. First, it gets the list of entities. then it gets the list of fields for each of those entities. And that's what we're going to do here. All right. So then now that we've gotten the list of entities, we're going to get the info about the particular entity. And I put that connection ID in here. All right. And this is the, we'll get the list of entities here. And now we can see that we've gotten the list of entities for this particular connection. And in this case, it's Salesforce. So we can see the account, role change, event. These are all the entities that go along with Salesforce. All right. Now, when we get the list of entity fields, what we do is we use this call. We get the org, the connection ID, and then the entity name. You can use either the ID from the previous call or just the straight name of the entity. In this case, it's contact. So when we send this over here, we get back this list of, these are all the fields within the contact record itself. All right. And let me show you what this looks like here. I just put this into a text editor. So you see that these are all the field names. So these are all the field names, and the description will tell you if it's a linked field or not, and the length. And you could use this JSON here to generate a SQL file. You could manipulate this JSON or generate a SQL file, and then you could use that as a target for your system, right? So people, so when you think about the APIs, there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of things you can do to automate processes, to pull data out from the system. And I wish you good luck with all of that. If there are any questions, you can please post them into the comments in our YouTube channel. All right, thank you very much. We will see you again next month, where we're going to go over the best practices for migrating applications between dev and production servers.